Hello, Southwest Florida homeowners and homebuyers. Welcome to the 239 Real Estate Roundtable podcast, your go-to source for navigating the vibrant real estate landscape of our beautiful region. I'm your host, Kevin Tremmel, a local real estate agent, leader, and investor here in Southwest Florida. On this podcast, we bring you insights from best in the business, top-notch real estate professionals, seasoned agents, and experts in everything from homeowners insurance to mortgages, maintenance, and repairs. Whether you're a first-time homebuyer or a seasoned homeowner, we've got you covered with tips, strategies, and valuable insights to make your journey in Southwest Florida's real estate market a breeze. Get ready to unlock the doors to successful home ownership. This is the 239 Real Estate Roundtable podcast, where we demystify the process, share insider knowledge, and ensure you're well equipped to make informed decisions. Let's dive in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the 239 Real Estate Roundtable podcast. Today, our guest is Bishoy Habib. Bishoy is a real estate attorney and the managing partner at Levie Legal in Tampa, Florida. His firm specializes in real estate and business law. Bishoy has 12 years of legal experience. He has closed over 1,000 real estate transactions and closed over $12 billion in transactions. He's also a real estate investor and a broker. So I'm super excited for our conversation and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Well, why don't we get started kind of talking a little bit about you? Why don't you tell us who you are, where are you from, a little bit about your background, and what brought you to where you're at today?
Absolutely. So it all started before I was born. Immigrant parents moved here from Egypt in the 70s, didn't know anything about the culture, didn't know anything about real estate, didn't know anything about America, barely spoke English. And so moved here, the American dream. You know, my dad was a pharmacist, but he had the foresight to understand that real estate was the path to prosperity in this country. And so very early on in the 80s, he started learning about real estate on the side as a side hustle and eventually started buying up real estate. And he did it through the steps of the courthouse in foreclosures back when before foreclosures were cool and before real estate was even that cool. Yeah. Slowly started to realize like this is a pretty good way to make money. And so he quit his full-time job as a pharmacist and just did real estate full-time. So I grew up in that. I was born into that. I remember driving around his properties with him. I negotiated my first commercial lease at the age of 15 on my dad's property. The state of Florida was the tenant. How much work I actually did, I don't really know. But in my mind, I negotiated the whole thing. I felt like Jerry Maguire, right. And so show me the money. So that was kind of, what's the word, addicting, if you will, right? So ever since then, I kind of knew I wanted to be in real estate. And so I went to law school. And so I went to USF here in Tampa. I'm based in Tampa. I went to Stetson Law in St. Pete nearby. And when the market got out, I didn't really plan to practice law. I kind of wanted to get my law degree. I got my MBA and I figured, well, I'll use this as a real estate guy. The market was very soft when I got out of school, and there was the great financial, recession. And so I ended up just working for a law firm. So I went to New York. I worked for a law firm that handled New York City stuff. And our biggest client was a hotel developer named Sam Chang. He had built, up till now, he's built like 100 hotels in New York, something around there. He's the biggest hotel developer in the history of Manhattan. And so for me, from a kid from Orlando, Florida, where I grew up, to go my first job out of law school to be up there in Manhattan doing those projects, $100 million deals, was an insane opportunity for me. Eye-opening, taught me how real estate deals really work from inception, from the due diligence on the dirt, ground leases, construction, refinancing, bridge and mezz lending, JV agreements, partnership agreements, funds, all these things that really I had never had exposure to in my life. And it was a tremendous opportunity and taught me a good work ethic as well. So after 2 years up there, I got my license in New York. I thought I was going to be up there for a while. And then a couple things happened that made me come back to Florida. Number one, family reasons. My mom got sick and I wanted to be with her. And number two, the quality of life in New York and the cost of living in New York at that time was way worse and more expensive than it was in Florida. And so now I think Florida is more expensive than New York. I don't know, but it is in Tampa anyways. But at least the quality of life I stand by is much better in Tampa than it ever will be again in New York. So And we have a lot of different things going for us, but that's a different conversation. So I moved back down to Tampa, got a job down here and as an attorney, and just kind of kept growing. And eventually one day I looked up and I was like, damn, I'm getting pretty good at this lawyer thing. I might as well just stick with it, because I kind of didn't know how long I'd be doing it, because again, it wasn't my intention when I started. So yeah, I mean, worked with a bunch of investors, developers, and really that's what I focus on. 2 years ago, I opened up my own law firm, Levie Legal, based here in Tampa. We help clients all over the state and really all over the country. And we focus on structuring, negotiating, and closing commercial real estate transactions. We do a ton of investor work. We do a ton of lender representation. And, the way we differentiate ourselves and what I built my entire law firm on was three things. Number one, being responsive. Number two, being deal friendly. And number three, being trustworthy. And if you go take a poll among people who have used attorneys, those are the top three pain points you will hear 100% of the time is, I can't get a hold of my attorney. Number one, that's why we're responsive. Number two, my attorney's killing my deals, right? We don't kill deals. We make deals happen. We're deal making attorneys, not deal breaking attorneys. And that's very important to me. And number three, they're overbilling me. I don't know how they came up with this invoice. This doesn't make sense to me. No, we're trustworthy. We're always going to put you first as a client. That's the most important thing. And that's why, even though I spent a ton of money on ads last year and Google and all that, 85 to 90% of my business comes from referrals, and it's just growing stronger and stronger. And we're growing. We have new attorneys I'm hiring right now. So that's kind of my story. That's how I ended up here. But really, I love putting deals together. That's what I love doing the most, and executing on those deals and maximizing profit and limiting liability for all my clients.
Cool. Yeah, you pretty much, I have no follow-up questions. We can stop it right here. So no.
I've got my pitch down, right?
Yeah,
I've
this
got
is not the first introduction about you and your company you've done, I can tell. But yeah, man, I mean, super, super exciting story. And I couldn't agree with you more about the whole New York Tampa thing. I think, quick side note, and then we'll get back to subject. But Tampa is like this really unique city where it's like bigger and more exciting than where I'm at in Fort Myers, but like not as crazy big like as Miami. It's like that. It's found like its niche.
The small big city.
Yeah,
big,
it's like
small city.
Yeah, it's found like its niche there in the middle.
100%. That's exactly it.
But so it sounds like, as is pretty customary in real estate, I feel like most people, when they are in real estate, they tend to do a lot of things in the real estate realm, right? Like, you're a broker, you're an investor, you're an attorney, right? Like, I'm an agent, I also invest, right? So I guess, you have these three things that you do: invest, you're a broker, you're an attorney. How have those three roles kind of shaped the way that you approach a deal or a real estate transaction? And how does that kind of give your clients an edge? Because I know you mentioned you're deal makers and not deal breakers. And I imagine, like you said, a lot of attorneys that haven't been like on the broker and investor side, they break deals all the time. But, one of the things you probably have is, since you've been on the other side of making deals, you see it from a different perspective. So can you just shed a little bit more light on that?
One of our biggest advantages is that we've been there and done that. And we're not talking from a place of theory. We're talking from a place of practice. So last year alone, me and my two business partners, we closed 45-ish transactions on the investment side. Those were novations, short sales, wholesales, fix and flips. We did some Section 8 stuff all over the country. So, when I speak, it's not from, I read this in a book or I saw it on bigger podcasts. It's like bigger podcasts. It's like, it's what we bigger pockets. I don't know why I said that, but anyways, it's bigger pockets podcast, but it's because we have done it. And also, when I'm speaking to my clients, I'm talking to people all day who are doing deals. And some of them are early on in their cycle as investors, and some of them are 20 or 30 years into their cycle as investors. And so I'm constantly this wealth of knowledge of, hey, this is what's been working for me. Hey, this hasn't been working. Hey, I got sued for this. Hey, I made a ton of money doing this. That's all right here, right? So every time you talk to me, I have information that I can provide, and that's very valuable to my clients. And the value of having an investor-friendly, deal-friendly attorney on your side is that you're more likely to make money. I'm not a litigator. I have litigation team at my law firm because you have to. And when things slow down, like the market's obviously not doing well right now, everyone sues everyone. And so you have to have a litigation team because that's a big part of a law firm. But that's not our go-to. It's not, I would rather close deals all day than do litigation. And we probably make more money on litigation, but nobody wins. You very rarely have a litigation where everybody's happy with the outcome.
Yeah, where everybody's high-fiving each other.
And most of the time, nobody's happy. And that's the whole point. Nobody's happy. And at the end of the day, really, the attorneys win. And I'm just being transparent with you. Yep. And so it's not an area that I would rather get a deal closed, but you have to have bark behind your bite, right? So you have to enforce things sometimes, and that's where we come into play. We had a situation, and I'll just give you a simple example why you need somebody like me versus a non-attorney. And I always pick on the family law attorneys. I have nothing against family law attorneys. It just happens to be them because, I did my will with this person 8 years ago. I did my divorce with this attorney 5 years ago. So I'm going to get their advice on this real estate deal. They don't know anything about real estate deal. I don't know anything about divorce. Don't ask me about your divorce. I don't know anything about it. Don't ask me about immigration. I don't know anything about immigration. I would never try to help you on that. Real estate, I know it all. That guy doesn't know anything about real estate. They do divorce, and that gal does immigration. So I had a situation where a client approached me and they had an option. They had a lease. It was a commercial building. They had a lease to buy a commercial building. And it was a good option. Like, it was all written well. It was clear cut. There wasn't really any ambiguity. And they had this option that they exercised. Like, this lease was entered into many years ago, right? And the property had increased in value substantially, probably doubled in value since then. And this tenant, who ended up being my client, she had put so much money, and it was her business. She was an owner occupant. It was a daycare, right? And so she put so much love into this building. It was her baby. She spent money she didn't have to spend per the lease in terms of maintenance, in terms of upgrades, things like that. She put 6 figures into it over the past 5 years, let's call it, because she was so invested. It was her baby. And because of that option, she knew in her mind she was going to buy that property down the line. So she felt like, whatever, I'm going to spend this money anyways. She's such a good person. She's a big client of mine now. But anyways, she went to exercise that option, and the landlord was basically big boying her, was like, yeah, no, we're not signing a contract. We're not agreeing. The price has got to come up. And they were dragging their feet, and they didn't have the right to do that under the lease and the option. So she hired an attorney. It was her family law attorney. And the family law attorney didn't really know how to do it, and, sent like a soft letter and, hey guys, can we work this out? It didn't work. They basically could tell right away that wasn't going to, she just didn't know what she was doing. And they read it, they smelled the weakness, and they didn't cooperate. She called me. I wrote a pretty strong demand letter, and, within 20 days, we had the executed contract, and they never messed with her again because I told them, this is what we're going to do. I know my rights, and we're going to come after you, and so on and so forth. And she called me almost in tears. She said, I can't believe you just did in 20 days what my other attorney couldn't do in 6 months, and it's not because I'm a superhero. It's because I know what I'm doing. It's real estate law. It's very unique, and it's very different. You have to have someone who knows the nuances of it, and that's why it's super important.
Yeah, awesome. And I know you mentioned the S word there once or twice, the Sue word. So, all the investment strategies, and you can have all the pro formas in the world, and you can have the greatest deal finders in the world, and all off market and this kind of stuff. But all of that stuff is more or less meaningless if you aren't like properly protected, right? So you kind of touched on it a little bit, like, asset protection. But what are kind of like some of the biggest risks that you see on a daily basis that real estate investors face when it comes to asset protection? And what steps can be taken to safeguard investors' portfolios that have been, like you said, some of them 20, 30 years investment? I'm sure those are some pretty sizable portfolios. How can investors protect those?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So it depends on your priorities, shift based on where you are in your investment life cycle, right? So when you're beginning, you don't really care about protecting your assets. You don't really care about taxes because you're not making money. You just want to maximize your revenue, right? That's really what it is. As you shift towards the later end of your cycle, you're much more concerned about asset protection, estate planning, tax ramifications. and capital preservation, right? You're not going to take as many chances or as big of chances when you're in retirement or near retirement. So all of those things really are subjective depending on where you are, how aggressive you want to be, your goals, your family. There's a lot of factors. But I'll give some general advice early on in the process, and even some savvy investors. The number one mistake that I see investors make, it's not even something like really that you don't know, but I'm going to tell you, putting investment real estate in a personal name. It is a terrible idea. I highly advise against doing it. We can move it into an LLC if you want. It's not expensive at all. It's very cheap to do, and it could save you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of personal liability. Okay. The best way to do it, since you're in Florida and I'm in Florida, for all my Florida people, is a land trust, a Florida land trust. Why? There's three major benefits to a Florida land trust, and there's many more other benefits that are smaller. But the big three benefits are, number one, privacy. Nobody knows who owns the property. If you set it up properly, if you have a good real estate attorney who knows what they're doing, nobody knows you own that asset. Why does that matter? Bishoy, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't have anything to hide. Why would I care if someone knows I own the property? Let's say you're driving down the street and you hit someone. Let's say you're not driving down the street. Let's say your son or daughter is 19 years old and they're driving down the street with your car. What happens when they get in a car accident and they hit somebody who hires an attorney? The first thing that attorney is going to do is look up who is the owner of the vehicle. And if the owner of the vehicle, they're going to do a search, right? And they're going to see an asset search. What do they own? We are in Florida, okay? Again, my Floridians, you know it's a sunshine state. That means all these things are public. The LLCs are public. Who owns property is public. I could run a search in 5 seconds flat. I'm on Sunbiz every day, and I search the public record for the county records for real estate every day. Yeah. I could find everything you own if you're not protected properly in 5 seconds flat. Oh, you own 12 rental properties. You own 4 rental properties. You own 12 LLCs that are tied to these properties. Okay, we're going to go after you, not just for policy limits. We're going to go after you for more. If I look you up and you're broke, what am I going to do as an attorney? I'm not going to go after you. It's not worth my time. My client's not going to make money. I'm not going to make money. We're going to drop it, right? I always give this analogy. It's a little bit crude, but if you got hit by a Maybach, and you got hurt, you probably would look into suing that person. If you got hit by a homeless person, are you going to sue the homeless person? You're not, right? So it's just, you got to protect yourself. You got to stay off the radar. You got to look broke. That's number one. That's why privacy and anonymity is extremely important. Number two is the only state in the whole country that has it is Florida, and that's the Florida Land Trust, which is asset protection, limited liability. And what that means is, just like an LLC, when you own real estate in a land trust and someone slips and falls in that property, they cannot sue you personally. They can only sue the land trust. And that's why it's important to have a 1-to-1 ratio, so you segregate your risk, so that one property per land trust. And so whatever happens to that land trust, it stays confined to that land trust, and that's it. Florida is the only state with that limited liability. The 49 other states do not have that. So take advantage of it if you're in Florida. The third major benefit to a land trust is estate planning. So if and when when you pass away, you can pass that along to your children, your spouse, whoever you want, without probate. If you've never been through probate, it's an extremely painful, expensive, and time-consuming process. You have to pay the court. You have to pay attorneys. You have to publicize all the information. You have to tell all your creditors, whoever the person who died, you have to tell their creditors, hey, if we owe you anything, you can come grab it now. You have to publicize it. It's a terrible, painful process. That's why trusts are so important, and that's why a land trust is the optimal way to hold real estate in Florida. So never hold real estate in your personal name. That's the first tip I have for you. Even if it's an LLC, that's way better than your personal name. And then maybe to my more advanced people, it's, be careful the partnerships you get into. Make sure everything's papered up properly. If you're going to do a joint venture, if you're going to do a partnership agreement, even if you're going to have a GC build out a property for you, whether it's a new construction, whether it's a reno or fix and flip, make sure you're papered up properly. Make sure you're protected up front. Don't ever just do a handshake agreement with people, because that backfires more often than not. I'm not saying it's never worked, but
right.
You got to hold people accountable, and so paper it up properly. Pay an attorney on the front end to do the work right. Otherwise, it could cost you a lot more on the back end. And I could tell you a story if you want. I'm dealing with it right now. of someone who didn't pay on the front end and now they're paying on the back end. But you want to make sure you're papered up. You want to list out everybody's rights and responsibilities very clearly, because that to me is the biggest issue I see in partnerships is they may talk about it on the front end, but it's not documented that this partner is supposed to raise the capital, manage the asset, whatever it is, right? And this partner is supposed to deal with the investors and manage the, whatever the responsibilities are, right? But that's where you get in trouble with partnerships. And so it's something I see every day in my practice.
Okay. Yeah. And just a follow-up quick with so the land trust, I've heard about them. I feel like for, not the investor that has 30 years experience, they're a lot less known than an LLC. Would you agree with that? Like
100%
average mom and pop investor, right? Like they might have not even ever heard of a land trust. It's just always the LLC. You mentioned the 3 advantages, and I just got to ask this for completeness sake, obviously. Are there any disadvantages to a land trust versus an LLC, or is it pretty much win-win? Or is there anything where you in some situations where you would say, hey, let's just do an LLC instead of a land trust? Like, is there anything like that, or
there's no disadvantages to a land trust, right? The only time I would say let's use an LLC versus a land trust is if your lender says we only want to lend on an LLC, not a land trust. And some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them don't care. Some of them are like, we're only going to lend into an LLC for investment purposes, not a land trust. That is the only potential. And I don't think that's a downside. That's just a lender preference, but it's not like a downside to using a land trust. It's more expensive on the front end to set up than an LLC, but you don't pay annual dues. So it ends up offsetting. With an LLC, you have to file every year. You have to pay $125 to the state. There's nothing like that with a land trust. So you could hold it for 20 years and never pay $1 after you create it. So to me, it's an advantage to having it that way. Yeah. So I would just say this, though. You're exactly right, Kevin. People are scared or confused about trusts, and they think it's this mythical creature that only the super wealthy use, and you have to be a billionaire to have a trust. And I'm not a trust baby, and I don't have a trust fund. And guys, let me break it down for you. It's very simple. It's like an LLC, except there's a third party in there called a trustee. The trustee is the one who technically has to sign stuff, but they can only do it if you, as the beneficiary, that's your name in this thing, you tell me, if I was your trustee, hey, Bishoy, I want you to sign this document for me. I approve it. I sign the document for you. And that's only to serve to keep you private. That's the whole point. Land trusts have actually been around in the state of Florida since 1963. LLCs have not been around. They came around in the 1980s. So the land trust is actually an older sibling or cousin to the LLC. It's been around longer. However, people are just afraid of it. There's this stigma or this confusion around it, which I'm trying to break. It's not that complicated at all. It's just there's a third party there. It's called a trustee. And that trustee basically does whatever you tell them to do, in essence, the way that I draft them. So the other thing people ask me, well, what if the trustee steals my property? Well, anyone can commit fraud on anyone. I could still forge a deed in your name today. I could do that. I'm not allowed to do that, but I could do that. So it's the same thing with the land trust and the trustee. The trustee is not allowed to do anything without your permission. Again, that's the way that I set them up. But if you don't feel comfortable with that, we still have a workaround to where you can remain private and have full control and be the trustee. And that's I'm not going to tell you how to do that on air, but if you retain me, I'll tell you how to do that. And it gives you the best of all cases. But people have this fear. Well, what if they steal my property? That's not legal. That's not legal. That's criminal. And if anyone ever does, that's why it's important to have a trustee that you trust, someone like an attorney, a CPA, or a bank, because then there's somebody you can go after, right? Not some random dude you met at an investor club one time that can run off with your property, but somebody that you can trust, that you can go after if anything goes sideways. I have my license as an attorney in 2 states, and I'm probably going to get it in a 3rd state soon. And your property doesn't mean anything. I don't care about your property. I will never do anything to steal your property. I have enough going on. And you need to get with people who have things going on and have things to lose, because those are the people that you can trust, because they have a lot going on. They're not coming to steal your property. So it's not a real concern that you should be concerned about. You obviously want to have someone you trust, but you have full control over the asset if it's in a land trust. That's kind of the message I want to send.
Right. And so you said, and more like typically the best trustees would be either the attorney that I guess does the paperwork, your CPA, or like your bank. Those would kind of be the three go-tos where more people kind of do that as a trustee, correct?
I would recommend that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would recommend that.
Okay. And then one other thing I think that's also really important just to highlight real quick, and what you mentioned is an LLC is not, especially in Florida, right? It's not as private as most people think, right? Going back to like the misconceptions about trusts and LLC, like you said, I mean, you can go on Sunbis right now and see, who's the managing member and like who's the registered agent and like all these things, right? And like, I mean, it's not as private as most people think it might be.
It's not private at all.
Yeah.
There's nothing private about it. It's all 100% public information. So
Right.
people don't know that. I mean, I think people are starting to understand that concept, especially in this day and age. Florida is the most litigious state. In 2023 or 24, we had twice as many lawsuits as the number 2 state in the country. And the number 2 state was New York. And we had double the amount of lawsuits here in Florida as the state of New York. So let that sink in when we talk about asset protection. This isn't some pie in the sky. This is people are getting sued. I know people who got sued and lost everything because they held it in their personal name. Imagine working 25 years in real estate, acquiring a small fortune and having it all stolen away from underneath you by a greedy attorney, by a frivolous lawsuit, by a bad faith actor, or because you made a simple mistake, like maybe in a car accident or something like that. So, these are real things. These are not, this is not fake.
Yeah, it happens every day. Yeah, for sure. And then, so another thing I want to touch base on. So as we all know, interest rates are extremely high, especially from the time when you graduated or when I got licensed, and they're just very high, which makes deals harder and harder to get done. So I feel like creative financing is kind of becoming more and more popular with rates where they're at. What have you kind of seen? And you see deals every day, small, big, medium, everything. So what are kind of some of the most effective creative financing methods you've seen work in today's market? And obviously, what legal aspects should people keep in mind when they do some kind of out of the box financing?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of what we've been seeing lately is the subject to stuff. That's been the hottest stuff in the past 3 years, I'd say, since the interest rates went up. So subject to transactions is what that actually means in a legal sense is you're buying a property subject to the existing mortgage, meaning when the seller sells you the property, they're not paying off the mortgage, they're leaving it in place. So of course your question is, well, why would you agree to leave the mortgage in place? The only reason that would make sense, or the biggest reason that would make sense, is if the existing mortgage had a lower interest rate and significantly lower interest rate than the current rates. And so we saw a lot of this in 2023 and 22 when rates went up, and 24 when people were locking in rates during COVID at 3%, and now the rates were 7.5%, right? So if you're an investor, or even if you're buying it personally, but a lot of these were investors, you can't make the numbers work at 8%, but you can make them work at 3%, right? And so that margin is what makes the deal work or not work. So the whole deal is contingent upon this mortgage staying in place. Otherwise, there's no deal. So on the market, as everyone knows, when interest rates go up, that's done intentionally to slow the market down. That's what the Fed did, right? Because of the inflation. And so naturally, it's the same in real estate. When rates go up, the activity slows down because deals just don't make sense. And that's why in both the commercial and the residential world, there has not been nearly as much activity as there was during COVID when it was going insane. Yeah. So that's a way that deals kept flowing. The subject to transactions can make a lot of sense and can be a very good tool. There's a lot of risk that come with it. And what I like to say about the sub to transactions is I do them all the time. I've represented sellers, I've represented buyers. They can be great. You just have to do things the right way. You have to be aware of the risk, and you have to have good documentation because you're both married to each other after the deal, unlike a lot of other deals. Yeah. As a seller, your name is still on the mortgage. You might have a personal guarantee which says that you have to pay any shortfall. You have your credit on the line, right? If there's a foreclosure, it goes on your credit. So you have to really sell to a buyer who you trust is going to do the right thing and make the payments and not screw you over. As a buyer, you're probably coming in with some money or putting some money into the property to fix it up or paying the seller some money at closing. So you should have skin in the game. And if you have skin in the game, then it becomes a matter of, well, I hope the seller doesn't do anything to jeopardize and have this loan called due. Otherwise, I'm kind of in trouble, right? Because you could lose that whole equity piece if you can't make the payment. And so, we could dive a little bit deeper into it later, but the point is that's a subject to transaction, could be very good, could be very risky. I've seen them go very well. I've seen them go sideways. So just be careful on those, but absolutely something you should consider if you're an investor or if you're looking to sell the property, and you could do that.
Yeah.
Seller financing, big one. That's not new. That's been around forever, and it will continue to be around forever. So a lot of sellers might do this because, number one, they'll get a higher purchase price versus if they only were accepting cash and conventional financing, because the buyer may not be able to get financing a different way. But if you finance it, they'll give you your price. And so it's a give and a take. Also, if you don't want to take the tax hit, if you have a big capital gains on it, this is a way to help with that if you're a seller. So if you're going to realize a fat capital gains on it, this might be a way to offset that or mitigate it or at least delay it. So that's a reason people do it as well. And maybe you just want some income, not just a lump sum as a seller, but you want some income and you want to make some interest. And maybe 5% is good to you. You're okay collecting your 5% interest plus your principal on that money. And maybe that's your retirement, or maybe you just rather have that than deal with a tenant, but you also don't want the property anymore. So the seller financing can make sense for a lot of reasons. I love seller financing. I think it makes things a lot simpler because banks and lenders and credit unions and any kind of a lender really is a pain in the what. And I say that as a very endearing way because I represent them all. I love them, but they want, everything except blood work when you go to take a loan, right? Especially if you're doing conventional financing. So, you gotta know what your options are. I think that's the best way to put it.
For sure. Yeah. And great points. And I see on the residential side, I see the sellers financing like more and more. I mean, in some listings, it's like the first sentence that like even pops up. It's like assumable loan at, 4.5% with, 25% down, whatever it may be. So you're definitely right. You're seeing that more and more. But thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your expertise and your knowledge. I hope our audience got something out of this, and we will link all of your contact information and your social media down in the description below. But if someone wants to dive a little bit deeper about kind of anything we just talked about or has some questions for you, how can they get in touch? Where would be a good place to start?
Yes. So please find me on socials. It's at Attorney Bishoy, Attorney Bishoy, Instagram, YouTube. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's with my name right there, Bishoy M. Habib, ESQ. I'm based in Tampa. The law firm's name is Levie Legal, L-E-V, like Victor, A-C-Y, Legal. Name came about because I wanted to help clients leave a legacy. So, and I also want to leave a legacy. So levielegal.com. 813-553-2699.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Bishoy, and you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you, brother. It's been a pleasure.
And that wraps up another insightful episode of the 239 Real Estate Roundtable podcast. I hope you enjoyed our discussions and gained valuable knowledge to enhance your home ownership journey here in Southwest Florida. A big thank you to our incredible guests and, of course, to you, our listeners, for joining us. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, or if you'd like to connect, feel free to reach out. You can find us on Instagram at Kevin Tremmel _real estate, on Facebook at Kevin Tremmel Real Estate, or visit our website, kevintremmel.com. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Your feedback is crucial, and we're always eager to hear from you. Until next time, this is Kevin Tremmel, your host, signing off. See you on the next episode.